Howdy folks, John here from rchelicopterfun.com. OpenTX for RC helicopters. If you've got a radio running OpenTX and you want to configure it so you can properly set up any collective pitch RC helicopter, I'm going to be showing you my base foundation that I use for all my machines, micro to monster, electric, nitro, even turbine. Let's get right into it. As I said, this will apply to any OpenTX radio, and my base heli template or foundation is right off of OpenTX University's website. Any who watch my channel, you know I reference that site often. That's where I learned all my heli setup for OpenTX. And I've changed a few little things based on what I'm comfortable with. And that's the beauty with OpenTX, right? Is you can customize it any way you want. And the way I've customized it is based on what I've been flying with for years with traditional computerized radios. So all my switch placements and layouts are based off of my JR Heli radio. So don't think that just because I'm showing you these switch placements and whatnot during my configuration steps, you're locked into that as well. Certainly if you want a more traditional switch layout for helicopters, you can use this. This is also not a collective pitch setup video. I've got an ebook that goes into great detail on collective pitch setup for various flying styles and skill levels. I'll fire a link in the little card doodad and below in the description. But for those of you who've already got that book, you can follow along because my OpenTX Heli template has all the same settings in it that I show in that ebook. Our goal by the end of the video is to have our OpenTX radio configured so it functions just like a traditional computerized radio with heli programming preset. These are all the necessary functions. We're going to be referencing back to this as we go through each one and check them off. So I'm not going to go over them in detail now. You can pause the video if you want though and look them over. One important thing I want to point out is external swash plate CCPM. That's the template we're going to be setting up today. If you're not sure what CCPM stands for, it's collective cyclic pitch mixing. I've got a page on my website that covers it in detail, what it is, how it works. I'll link to it below in the description. Essentially, it just describes how the servos are mixed to give the correct interactions to the swash plate for your collective and cyclic controls. Now with OpenTX, there's two things you have to know to do this correctly. You have to know if you've got external swash plate, CCPM, or internal. External, as the name suggests, mixing is done within the helicopter. So this will apply to almost all of today's modern flybarless helicopters, because the flybarless system, or flight controller if you want to call it that, is doing all the mixing on the helicopter. There's no radio mixing. This would also apply to old vintage flybarred helicopters that are mechanically mixed. As we can see here on this mechanically mixed heli, all the servo interactions are being mixed mechanically up to the swash plate. And on this helicopter, I'm using the OpenTX external swash plate template. Now the second type, the internal swash plate CCPM, where the swash mixing is done within the radio. I'm going to have a separate video on that going over it. You still have to use this base template, however, there's just a few changes to it. It would apply to flybarred helicopters from the past, probably 15 years when they went to electronic swash mixing away from mechanical mixing. And it can also apply to flybarless helicopters, however. You know, if their flybarless system doesn't do the mixing internally. Two popular examples would be the aligned 3G and 3GX flybarless systems. They had no internal mixing, and the mixing had to be done within the radio. And that's another thing to be aware of. There's a lot of misinformation out there saying there's OpenTX for flybars and flybarless. That's a generalization, and it's not correct. It has nothing to do with the stabilization type, whether it's electronic or mechanical. It has to do with the swash mixing type, if it's on the helicopter or in the radio. So now that we've got all that out of the way, let's start right at the beginning and create a new model in our OpenTX radio. I'm going to go into a new category here, which I created just so we can start from a fresh and clean state. Just called it Heli Demo. Oh, and I think it's pretty obvious to state this, but in your build options, make sure you have no heli unchecked We're not going to be using that in this video, but you will need it if you ever set up a heli with internal CCPM radio mixing. And at least it's there, so you'll have it in this foundation template. So we're just going to create a new model. Glider, plane, those are the only two options. Just hit return. We've already selected it. Just going to go into our model setup menus now. So first thing we're going to do is change the model name. You could change it to whatever you want. I'm going to call it Heli No Mix. You could put a model image in if you've got some stored on your SD card. I wouldn't bother because this is just our generic template for no internal radio mixing helicopters. And all you're going to be doing is you're going to be going back to this template and just copying it for every new heli you get. So I'm going to leave that blank. We haven't set up a logical switch for our timer yet, and there's really nothing else in here that we have to do at this point. Now this heli setup screen, this is what will come up as long as you have no heli not checked in your build options. And this is just where you select which swash type, and this is important for internal radio CCPM mixing. We don't have to worry about it with this template because we're doing the no mix or external mixing template, but this is where you would select your different swash plate types. Again, we're not doing any internal radio mixing, so we just keep this blank. Go to our next field, flight modes. Don't touch this. Now this is where we're going to be setting our 3 selectable dual and Expo rates. So first thing you have to figure out is which toggle switch you're going to be controlling your dual rates from. Again, I'm going off of my JR radio, what I'm familiar with. I like my cyclic dual rates with my SD toggle and my rudder dual rate with my SG. But this is entirely up to you. If you want, you could have really traditional style where you've got elevator dual rate on your far one, aileron on this one, and rudder on here. But I never fly that way. I like controlling my cyclic dual rate with one toggle, but you could certainly assign one to that, and one to that for your 3 dual rate channels. Anyway, you'll see this is in Spectrum and JR channel order. This just comes up as per your channel order that you selected during your radio build options. It doesn't matter at all though what order. You know, if you had Futaba channel mapping order come up where it was aileron, elevator, throttle, rudder, that's fine too. This has nothing to do with outputs. And the reason I set my dual rates up on the input side is so any mixing that occurs afterwards, such as when you're doing ECCPM mixing inside the radio for internal, it happens at the input side, so it won't mess any of your mixes up. So we don't use any dual rate, of course, for throttle, but we do for aileron, elevator, and rudder. So I'm just going to show how we do this. So we're just going to hit the, hold in the selection encoder. To select this, we're going to hit edit. And for my first dual rate, I'm going to have it at 100%, so no dual rate at all, 100% output, as we can see here for aileron, stick movement. But this is where I'm going to set up my Expo. And we're going to set this, oops, to plus 50%. Again, this is just my starting points that I have all my helicopters at. The reason I set 50%, I just like this feel around mid-stick. You'll see as I dialed that up, we have that exponential curve in here. So it's deadened mid-stick response slightly. You'll see the curve is shallowed out right around mid-stick. And I like all my dual rate settings to give roughly that same output. So you'll see when we do the other two why I selected 50% for this. And now we have to select which switch. So we'll highlight that, and we're going to select SD up. I like my dual rates to be at the highest in the up position, lowest in the low position, but that's entirely up to you. When I turn my radio on, I want all my front toggles low and all my back toggles back. But again, that is totally personal preference. And we can see now SD up. So that one's done. So we'll exit out of this. Now we're just going to copy this. This is the easiest way to do it. Copy it again. So there's our 3. Now we'll go into our second one here. Edit. And this is going to be 75% dual rate. Again, you can set this wherever you want. This is just my foundation setting. I will tweak it for every helicopter as required. Expo will be 25% positive. And my switch selection, I want it in the SD center position. So we'll just move our toggle switch. That's that one done. Go back. Oops, that changed to 74. Let's do this right if we're going to do it. Just so I don't mess anyone up. And then our last one, edit. This one will be 50% dual rate. And I want no Expo. And SD toggle down. Now hopefully you can see this. So you'll see the output around center stick as I change my SD toggle to my mid rates and my full rates. You can see the center output right around center stick remains the same with the 0 Expo, 25 Expo, and 50 Expo. So I'm going to do the same thing now for elevator and rudder. Okay, got all that finished. Just scroll down here so we can see them all. So we've got aileron, elevator, rudder. We've got our 3 selections for each one. Aileron and elevator are all controlled with the SD toggle. So there's the toggle in the up position, which is selecting 100% dual rate on both of those, aileron and elevator. Mid position 75%, low position 50%. And rudder, same thing, although it's on the SG toggle at the top here. So the SG toggle in the back position is selecting our lowest dual rate for rudder, 50% output. Mid position 75% output with positive 25% exponential and 100% output with the switch forward and 50% exponential. And the only other thing that we can set up here at this point, if you want, is your channel 5. You can call it gyro or gear, whatever you want. Let's call it gyro. And for our stick selection, this is your call. Most people will go SB because that's traditionally channel 5, but I like it on my SC switch, so it's close to my rudder. It just makes more sense there, but you can put wherever you want. There's so many ways to do this again, and it depends how you want this channel 5 controlled. If you want 0 to 100%, if you want several settings, one for, a lot of flybarless systems, they've got normal gyro at 0 or 50, auto level in the middle, and then rescue at 100%. So it's totally up to you. It's going to be largely dependent on your flybarless system, what outputs it calls for your different settings. And of course, if you're using it for gyro gain on a higher end flybarless system where you can actually select gains between rate mode, you might have one output at 25% for rate mode, 75% for heading lock, and you can do that with curves or output programming. We're just going to leave it linear for now. And that's all we have to do for our inputs. We're going to do mixes last. Let's go to our curves right now and set those up. So we've got our 3 selectable dual and Expo rates set up. And now we're going to be creating our curves for our 3 flight modes and for our throttle hold flight mode. The reason we're doing that first is because when we're doing our mixes, we have to select the curves, and if we haven't programmed them, there'll be nothing to select. We're going to be setting up 4 pitch curves and 4 throttle curves. So I'm going to do the throttle curves first. And again, these are just my generic base settings. You can set them up however you want, but then they will obviously be tweaked for the helicopter. So we're going to set our first throttle curve up, and we're going to call it TH normal, so THN. Now when you're first starting, you probably just want to keep this standard, and you can select either 5 or 7 points. 5 is the norm though. And we'll just set a normal throttle curve up here, 0% at low stick, go, or minus 100%. Sorry, I'm thinking 0 to 100, but no, it's actually minus 100 would be our low stick, no throttle. We'll go up to 0% or 50% output, and then maybe up to 20%, 25, 30. So just a fairly tame throttle curve. And if you want to smooth that curve out, you just check the little smoothing box, and you can see how it smooths the curve out there. And we're going to do our second curve. We'll call it TH1. Again, standard 5 points. And this one we'll set at 75% power, or 50%. Now you can see why having just 2 points would make this a lot easier. So 2 points. You can see if you wanted a flatline throttle curve, you could just use 2 points if you want to do it that way. But a lot of radios are 5 points, so that's what we'll stick with to keep it standard as we're showing this. And then we're going to do throttle 2. Again, standard. You could put it to 2 points. I'm going to do that just to save time here. And we'll go 100% output. Now again, these will all get tweaked when you're actually setting up your helicopter. This is just a foundation template, right? And then our last throttle curve that we're going to program is our throttle hold curve. So we'll call that THH. And standard, I'm going to do 2 points again just to make it simple. And throttle hold, of course, we want no throttle at all. Your call if you want to change that back to 5 points now or not. No need to though. Okay, so there's all our throttle curves programmed. Now I will start my pitch curves usually a few lines down, so I've got room in here for adding anything if I wanted to. You can do that if you wish, but just to keep everything in frame here on this video, I'm going to start the pitch curves on curve 5. And we will call this PT normal, pitch normal. Just in case you want to know how you change between lowercase and uppercase, you just hold your encoder wheel in. There. Standard, we'll leave it at 5 points. So a normal pitch curve, you could set this up whatever you want. It's generally fairly tame. Let's go about -1 degree up to +9 degrees. And yeah, I think you can see now why having just 2 points makes this a lot quicker when you're setting up your helicopter. But if you're used to 5 points or 7 points, you can certainly do it that way as well. So there's our normal flight mode pitch curve. Now we're going to do pitch for stunt 1, so we'll call it pitch 1. Standard again, I'm just going to change this to 2 points to simplify the process. And let's go, what's a typical sport mode? Probably about -10 degrees to +10 collective. Again, these are just arbitrary values. You have to check this with your pitch gauge on your helicopter. You never go by the values that are showing in the radio. You always check with a pitch gauge to confirm it. But that would be close to minus to +10 collective range if your helicopter is set up correctly. And now we'll do our stunt 2 pitch curve. So we'll call it pitch 2 points again. And we'll go the full collective range here. -12 to +12 on most of today's machines. So full linear output. And last but not least is our pitch curve for throttle hold. Call this RPTH. And I'm just going to go 2 points. And let's go about -5. And this depends on how you set your hold pitch curves up. So there's all our curves created. Now we're going to go into our mix. This is where things get a little bit more complicated. So mixing is where we assign our inputs to our actual channel outputs. And as you can see with my radio here, it defaults to spectrum channel mapping, channel 1 throttle, 2 aileron, 3 elevator, 4 rudder. If you had Futaba mapping, you would assign what we're going to be doing here for throttle on your channel 3. So we're going to do throttle here. This is where we're going to assign our 4 different throttle curves to channel 1. So we're going to edit. So we're going to call our first one normal for normal flight mode. Okay, source is our throttle input. Weight 100%, 0 offset, trim, yes. Now this is where we're going to select which curve we're going to use. We go to custom and then throttle normal. If you didn't have your throttle curves programmed in, you couldn't select that. That's why we had to do our curve programming first. And don't worry about any of that. Now you have to decide which switch is going to control your flight modes. Again, going by traditional RC radio layout, your helicopter flight modes are generally selected with the left top front toggle, which for OpenTX radios is going to be the SE. And I want my normal flight mode with the toggle back. So that will be with the toggle with the arrow pointing up. Now we'll go out of this. And we've got to copy this 3 more times now because we've got to create stunt 1, stunt 2, and hold. So we'll go into this again. We're going to hit copy. And we're going to copy again. And we're going to copy 1 more time. Now we've got to change all these to our various selections. So this one's going to be called stunt 1. Source is throttle stick as well. Weight, offset, trim, yep. And this is where we're going to go custom. Now we're going to select our throttle 1 curve. Position will be SE toggle in the mid position. Now this is very important. We have to change the add to replace, because when we switch this, we want to replace that previous throttle curve with this new one. Very important. And we're doing this in sequence, so whatever follows in sequence will replace the last one. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's why we have to go normal, throttle 1, throttle 2, hold. Hold's the most important. When you hit hold, you want that throttle curve to override any others. And same with your pitch curves. Stunt 2, source is throttle, weight 100%, offset 0, trim yes, custom, and now we're going to be using our throttle 2 curve, and this will be with our toggle forward, so arrow down. Again, very important, we have to hit replace. And then finally our last one, which is our throttle hold activation. Edit, call this hold. Again, source is throttle, weight 100, offset 0, trim yes, custom, yep. And we're going to select our throttle hold curve right there. And now this is very important. The activation for this is going to be our throttle hold toggle. Now on my radio, I've got the throttle hold 2 position on the SH switch. All Radio Masters and most OpenTX radios have the 2 position on the left side, but I have switched my toggles around. I have a separate video on that. I will throw it up in the card there and below in the description if you want to see how to do that on the Radio Master. Again, the reason I've done that is because I have flown my whole life with the throttle hold on the right side, and it would just, you know, I've learned that muscle memory. I'm not going to change it. Throttle hold, forward. SH switch, arrow pointing down. And again, very important, we have to hit replace. So we've got to do the same thing now for our pitch curves. We leave channel 2. We don't have to worry about that. Ailerons on channel 2. You know, you can go into edit if you want just to make sure everything's here, but you don't have to change a thing. Same with channel 3, don't have to change a thing. Channel 4, we don't have to change a thing. Channel 5 is where we will assign our gyro. I don't know what you want to call this, gyro or stabilization, gear. Let's just call it gear. And the switch, again, what we selected, I did my SC. And there we can see our outputs for channel 5. Switch in the down position 100, mid position, centered, up position, minus 100. And then channel 6 is our collective pitch channel. So this again is where we're going to have to do the exact same thing as we did for throttle. We're going to have to make 4 of them, but this is for our pitch curves. So channel 6, we're going to call this normal, just like we did with throttle. And it's our throttle stick. Don't change this again, leave it. Curve though is custom. And this is where we're going to pick our normal pitch curve. And we will copy this. There we go. And now we'll edit these other ones. Okay, I'm finishing off our channel 6 pitch curve outputs. Pitch hold. Switch is again our SH. For most people though, it's going to be SF in the back position. And very important again with replace. And I just realized when I was doing the pitch curves, I forgot to mention to also add your switch to your flight mode switch. So now if we go in here for channel 6, we can see we've got pitch normal, 1, 2, and hold. Our switch selection, as we move the switch, we can see the 3 different curves being selected. We've got all of them being replaced in sequence, so if you hit hold, it overrides everything else. And the very easiest way to tell if this is all working is to go into your monitor screen, one of the most useful screens on any computerized radio. So here's our channel 1 output in our normal channel 1 output in normal flight mode. If you remember the curve, we were right at 0 at lowest, and it went up to about 75% power or so. So that's right, and if we look at our collective range on channel 6, we've got about -1, you know, we were -10 to +80 on our one pitch curve. If we select flight mode stunt 1, the throttle curve we were using was a flat line, 75% output, or 50% if you go by the -100 to +100 scale. Again, in my Setup and Tips ebook, I show how to convert those 2 scales if you're curious. And here's our collective range, -80 to +80, roughly -10 to +10 collective, depending on how you have your heli set up, of course. Stunt 2, 100% power output throughout the collective range. And we can see our full linear channel 6 output. And if we hit throttle hold, we've got -100% power. And when we're also in here, let's check our rudder output. So I'm moving rudder stick. Here, I'm going to zoom out here a bit so we can hopefully see everything. So I'm moving rudder stick full travel, 50% output as per our dual rates. We'll put our mid rates on. There's 75% output. And we'll turn rudder dual rate to full. And there we're getting our full 100%. Same thing now with aileron, 50% dual rate, 75% dual rate, 100%. And elevator, 50% with low dual rate, 75 with mid dual rate, 100% high dual rate. So let's look at our list here, see where we're at. So we've got our 3 switched flight modes and throttle hold, that's all working. We've got our dual rates working. Channel outputs, we've checked that on monitor. We'll go into our output screen now. I just want to talk about that a little bit. Channel 5, we've done that. And we've also still got to set our logical switch. But let's just go into outputs here. We'll zoom back in. So outputs, this is where you will set your minimum and maximum and your centering position. Now normally this is all going to be just left at 100%. For some flybarless units though, you're going to have to increase or decrease this to match the radio output to what the flybarless system wants to see. And for centering, you're going to have to, if the channel isn't centered or your servos aren't centered, this is where you would change that. The centering point is 1500 microseconds. Now let's go into let's get our timer working here. So select logical switch 1, and we are going to have our comparison type A being greater than X. And we're going to select channel 1 as the variable, because channel 1 is our throttle channel. So anytime the throttle channel is over a certain percentage of output, the timer will start. And if you were using Futaba channel mapping, you would set this to channel 3 instead of channel 1. Okay, and then our output. So minus 100% would be low stick. So we don't want the timer starting right at low stick. If we had this set to 0, the timer would start at mid stick. Don't want that. Let's start the timer at, I don't know, minus 75%. I'm going to zoom out a bit. Your logical switch will show you when it's active. It will highlight. So as I move the throttle stick up, there. So just a little bit, and that switch activates. I think that's a little bit too sensitive. Let's go down to minus 65, see if that's a little bit better. There, that's a little bit better. That's personal choice though. So now that we've got that logical switch programmed, we can go back into our model setup, and for timer, now we can set this to logical switch 1. There it is. It's hiding. And then this is where you would set what you want your timer at. Let's go 4 minutes. Let's go 5 minutes. And while we're in here, let's also check off another item on our list, and that is set switch warnings. You'll notice, here I'm just going to zoom out a bit, and we're power down.
No, nasty.
And if I power this back up,
You turned me on. Switch warning.
we get a switch warning because of the way I configure my switches. I want them down on the front, back on the top, which is different from how OpenTX is initially configured. And I feel having switch warnings is very useful. Let's go back into model setup. This is in the model setup screen. and we go down to our switch selections, and you would just set which direction you want your switches in. So A, I want the switch to be down. Switch B, I want it to be down. Switch C, I want to be down. D, want to be down. So let's see if that works. Turn it off.
Oh, nasty.
Turn it back on.
You turned me on.
There! No problems. So that's all good. So we can check that one off the list too. Now all that's left is setting some voice callouts. I'll just do a couple just so that you can see how easy this is. Most people already know how to do it, but if you don't, we'll get into that. So go into our special functions, so model select button, and then we will scroll over to special functions here, right there. So let's set up our flight mode toggle so we know what's happening. So we're just going to move our toggle when that's highlighted. So we'll do our normal flight mode. And then the function we want play track. And then depending on what voice pack you're using, we'll have all your different sound files here. I think Amber's is just called normal, right? Oh, she's got a lot. I shouldn't have started with this one, I guess. Where are you? Normal mode, right? There, let's try it.
Normal mode.
Okay. And we'll do 2. We'll do stunt mode 1.
Normal mode.
There.
Normal mode. Acro mode.
And then if you wanted to her to say it twice, like every second, every 2 seconds.
Acro mode. Acro mode.
But obviously 1 time is all you want her to say it.
Acro mode.
And then let's do our full 3D mode,
Acro mode.
which is SE down. Cover your ears for all you youngsters out there. We're going to have some foul language here. Where is it?
Acro mode. Shit is about to get real.
There we go.
Normal mode.
Normal mode.
Acro mode. Shit is about to get real.
So that's how you program your voice functions. So that is essentially OpenTX University's way to set up a collective pitch helicopter. I've tweaked it to my liking, not much to it. And we'll do another video upcoming if you want to see what's involved in setting up an internal mixed heli for older flybarless units that don't have internal mixing, or flybarred helicopters that need to be ECCPM mixed within the radio. Thanks for watching, folks. A rather long and boring video, but there's lots to cover in this. You know, it may seem very complicated, but the nice thing is now, once you've got that set up, it's done. So you just copy that setup, you go into your model select, and we would select our Heli no mix. We would duplicate the model, okay, and then we would select it.
Switch warning. Normal mode. Rudder low.
And then you would just go in. Now you would call it your actual heli name, OMP, M2, Kraken 580, whatever. Throw your image in. Reset your flight timer if you want to a different value. Then just select your RF module, protocol, bind it, all that good stuff. And then obviously set your helicopter up as required for your skill level and flying style and what the instructions call for by tweaking all the values that we've already got set up. You know, tweak your dual and expo rates as you need to. There's really nothing to change in your mix screens. You may have to tweak your outputs. One thing I never mentioned on output was direction. So if you have to reverse your channel direction, this is where you do it. So that's an important one. I forgot to mention that, sorry. And then of course, you'll have to tweak your throttle and pitch curves as required. But that is it. Thanks for watching, folks. We'll see you next time. Happy OpenTX Heli programming.